I have a question that I wanted to ask for a long time, someone on the left. Why the flag burning and the attacks on America? Why is this? These protests very often devolve into an attack on the country itself. Its symbols, this chant, America was never great, your founding fathers owned slaves. Why attack the whole country?
Well, I think you can find extremists on both the left and the right who do things that are anti-American. The same way you have these protesters, you'll have the Charlottesville protesters on the other hand who are anti-American. I don't support any of these people who, if you don't like America, get out of America. If you're a neo-Nazi, get out of America.
Well, I agree with that. Look, I have no problem with that. But hold on. Okay, and I think it's a fair point. But the scale is very different. So you have the Charlottesville riot or whatever it was last August, a year ago. You haven't seen anything like that since. The NFL has been in a continuous controversy over kneeling during the national anthem, an attack on a national symbol. Left-wing protests routinely contain attacks on the country. The T-shirt, "Your country was never great," is for sale online. So is the hat. What is that about? I'm not saying there are no conservatives, right-wingers who don't hate America, but there are a lot on the left who do, and they're very open about it. Why? And why don't leaders ever say anything about it?
Well, I think leaders do, and I think it's very easy to find the clips of the most crazy, most extreme elements of the political discourse and make that seem like that is the norm. That is not the norm. Most people who are protesting are saying we want reasonable policies that all Americans can unite around. And frankly, I think a large part of this falls on the president. You know, President Truman had a placard on his desk saying the buck stops here. That is what President Trump has to take up and understand, that he has to bring these parties together. If people are protesting over the immigration policy, then do like Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan would do, and you bring together the stakeholders, you hammer out an immigration reform bill, you bring it before the American people, you discuss it, and that will tamp down these protests. But leaving this vacuum of information where people think that children are being kidnapped, that's not going to work.
Okay, so I agree with a lot of what you're saying, actually. I do want a rational conversation about what's best for the country. Try to do that every night on this show. It's pretty hard to do that, though, when people are saying, not just random protesters in front of a donut shop in West L.A., but, I don't know, the ranking members on the Democratic side of the House and Senate are calling the President of the United States a traitor, someone who's committed treason, a death penalty offense. If you really believe the President was a Russian agent, as elected members of Congress have said today, then how could you do anything but try to overthrow him? That's not a predicate for reasonable discussion, is it?
Well, absolutely not. But what I think has to happen is the president hasn't explained what the point of the meeting with Putin was, what happened in that meeting with him for those 2 hours, why there was no other members of the intelligence community or national security staff there with them, why he offered to have Russians interrogate American citizens. So when you have this information vacuum, this falls in a large part on the president's communications team.
Well, wait a second. Then why are they? Hold on. I mean, I could rebut a lot of what you just said. The president can't hand anybody over to the Russians, despite what Democrats are saying. That doesn't work that way. You're not allowed. What is he going to, inject them with barbiturates and throw them on a plane to Moscow? I mean, it's ludicrous. But it's not my job to defend Trump. I'm just asking, if you don't know what happened, why are you jumping to the conclusion that he committed treason? That's what elected members of Congress are saying. They're using the word treason. If you really believed he was committing treason, why wouldn't you try to overthrow him or hurt him? Seriously.
But remember, this goes back to the concept of the buck stopping with the president. He has to use his bully pulpit not to bully people, but to articulate a message to America.
What do you mean? But what do you say if somebody says, wait, if I said, I don't agree with you, you've committed treason, you're a traitor, you're a sleeper cell for one of our enemies, what do you say to that? I mean, honestly, that's not the beginning of a conversation. That's a call for violence.
Look, Tucker, I practice criminal defense every day. And what ends up happening is people accuse your client of everything under the sun in the indictment. But what you do is argue back your point. You say that, well, the reason I was meeting with Putin was because we have interests in Syria that need to be articulated between the two parties. Because we have to work on oil and gas pipelines. He's not getting his messaging out. And when you leave this vacuum out there, that's when you have members of the Republican Party.
Are you being serious? I mean, are you being serious? Look, again, whatever. I don't care about the Republicans. Everyone always says, the Republicans say it too. I couldn't be less impressed with them as a group. That means nothing to me. But will you at least concede that calling someone a traitor is a conversation ender, not a starter? And maybe you should wait for evidence that a person has betrayed his country before calling him a traitor. Is that fair?
Well, that's fair, but let's not pretend that the last 8 years or last 16 years didn't happen. When you had people claiming that Obama was a Kenyan who was part of a sleeper cell sent here and part of a madrasa, let's understand this discourse didn't start with Trump.
No member of Congress ever said that.
Joe Walsh yelled out, "You lie," during the presidential address.
That. Okay, well, he did lie, actually, but lying is very different from being from a sleeper cell.
And while being a private citizen, President Trump pushed the birtherism idea for years. Let's understand that the buck stops with the president in order to tamp these things down. Have a conversation with the American people. Say exactly what you're... The buck stops with you. You are the leader of the free world.
I don't understand your point, but I appreciate part of what you're trying to say, but I don't understand the rest. Robert, it's nice to see you tonight. Thank you for coming on. Dan Bongino is a former Secret Service agent, NYPD officer, now an NRA TV contributor, frequent guest on this show because he's smart and concise and thinks stuff through. So, Dan, we've done a bunch of shows on this topic, but we're going to continue to because I think I'm not imagining the acceleration of the rhetoric. And when rhetoric reaches a certain point, it becomes violence. Where are we on that continuum, do you think?
Yeah, I'm worried. We're past the event horizon right now in the black hole, Tucker. And the reason I'm worried is I think what's going on here, and I'm not trying to be an amateur sociologist here, but in the past we've had kind of this iron triangle of activist groups, liberal politicians, and the media. And their tactic, Tucker, has been very strictly enforced gaslighting. Repeat a narrative, however false it is. Republicans are racist, misogynist. We've heard them all in the past. Repeat it confidently and isolate people from the truth by collectively reporting the narrative together. I think what's happening right now is Trump just absolutely refuses to back down to this. He'll use his Twitter account, he'll use the bully pulpit of the White House, and he will not play the typical rhino game of the past where the minute the R word or the M word or the xenophobic word comes out, he backs down. Therefore, to wrap this up, average levels of aggression aren't working, Tucker. So instead of dialing it back and re-strategizing, they're going to like hyper-aggression at this point, and that's where we are now, which really worries me.
But it's the supposedly responsible people who are doing it. Twice or three times this week I thought, now, if this were Obama who went to Helsinki and met with Putin, and I've never liked Obama, I thought he was bad for America, and all of a sudden Republican leaders were calling him a traitor, would I sit back and say, yeah, he's a traitor, or would I say, what do you mean by that? I mean, we're the responsible people on the left. It's okay to hate, to not like Trump, I get it, but why are they sitting back and allowing the leaders of their party to say things that are totally reckless and insane, which they are?
Because, Tucker, they've ginned up the base to such a point. You saw it in the opening segment with your debate with the liberal radio host. They've ginned up the base into believing that this man is actually these things. These are false. They're utterly absurd. The fact that we're repeating them, we've lost 10 IQ points talking about it. But they've ginned up their base into believing that this man is, the Trump, by the way, is a fascist. What else is the appropriate response? It's nothing but critical theory, you know, that acknowledges a construct of power kind of thing. And this, we have to shut him down. It's not even worthy of debate. And the hyper-aggressive response is the only response if you believe Trump is a fascist, which is absolutely absurd and ridiculous.
This Russia story is making us all very dumb. I'm not going to be able to balance my checkbook by next week. Dan Bongino, thank you very much. Good to see you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Well, the age of baby boys and baby girls appears to have come to a close. The most avant-garde parents are now raising babies. They don't have a gender. How does that work? Liberal Sherpa Cathy Areu, of course, knows the answer. She joins us next. Having a baby used to be a straightforward proposition. You could have a boy or you could have a girl. But now, there's a third option. It's called steep civilizational decline. A handful of parents across America are deliberately keeping their children's sex hidden and instead raising so-called babies. The idea is that only the children themselves should be able to decide whether they are boys or girls, without any of that pesky biological reality getting in the way. It's all very confusing, like a lot of 2018 is. So, of course, we called in our interpreter of all things progressive, our liberal Sherpa, Cathy Areu, founding publisher of Catalina Magazine. She joins us tonight. So, Cathy, goes without saying you're for this, of course.
Yep.
But doesn't this mean if you're going to raise a baby, how would you be able to change your child's diaper? Because the second you change the diaper, of course, you'd no longer be able to pretend that there was a question about whether this was a boy or a girl. You know.
Well, it's not about pretending. The parent definitely knows the gender. It's about not necessarily labeling the baby. It's about allowing the baby to decide what gender that baby wants to be when that baby can decide, which is around 4 years old. So from 0 to 4, the baby will not be labeled. The labeling theory will not apply from 0 to 4 years old. The baby will be a baby, neither a boy nor a girl. Whatever gender that baby chooses to be.
What other profound life decisions do we think people ought to be making at the age of 4? Are there any others?
Well,
whether to get a tattoo, whether to get married, enlisting in the military, voting, drinking vodka, smoking Marlboro Reds. Is there anything else that we think 4-year-olds are ready to decide?
This isn't actually a profound life decision. I mean, biologically, there's nothing really going on from 0 to 4 in that area that affects a person's life. Biologically, the experts say that boys and girls, all genders are alike. The boy's brain, the male brain, might be a little larger. The female's language might be a little bit more advanced.
Okay. No sexism on my show. Hold on. Whoa, slow down. No, here you're out there like boys' brains are larger. And I just want to say that kind of toxic masculinity has no place on this program. Thank you very much.
But that's all they can think of.
The bottom line is... all they could think of, like, difference in brain size, difference in genitalia, difference in bone structure. Just minor things like... Just minor things like that. Not perhaps. Like, factually. So, those are not minor things. Those are definitive things.
Minor.
So, like, why would you not tell your kids about that? At some point, they're going to drop trow and look down and say, wait, we look different. And you're going to be like, no, you don't. You're exactly the same.
And
that's lying, isn't it?
That's when the child, they say, is around 4 years old. So around 0 to 4, we're not going to say to a little female, a girl that you're a little princess, or boy, you're such a tiger. The labels are gone. You're not going to put that outside influence on a child. You're just going to be neutral. Everything's going to be neutral.
The outside influence of biological reality.
So
would you do this with anything else? But could we decide that we're not going to acknowledge temperature or weather or traffic? And you could just say, you know what? I don't think it's raining outside. Or you can decide whether it's raining outside. I mean, the weatherman says it is, that there's snow on the ground. Or the weather, you know what I mean? The weatherman says that it's 15 degrees out. But I'm going to... You know what I mean? Just kind of make up my own reality.
The parents who are really leading this movement.
We acknowledge biology and nature as real, right?
But the biology, the parents who came out with this, who came out in the New York Times and started this baby awareness, this gender-neutral awareness for babies, basically said, why should people be so obsessed if your baby is going to be a boy or a girl? Who cares about that area? It's actually a little human. We are bringing a little human into the world. Who cares about the genitalia? Who cares?
May I just suggest why? And this isn't just my opinion, but the opinion of every person who's ever lived going back, let's just say 10,000 years for the sake of neatness. Because men and women are completely different in key ways.
Babies?
Can we not say that anymore?
Babies are different. Babies aren't different. They're little human beings, and there's really not much of a difference between different genders. No. There is no difference. And men and women, we would say, are equal.
I'm trying to laugh so I don't cry. Cathy Areu, you can be equal but different, which they are. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Joining us now to weigh in on all of this absurd rhetoric is a counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway. Hello, Kellyanne. You know, as I listened to that rundown of comments, I couldn't help but think, you know, treason is an offense for which you can receive the death penalty. Are they looking for this president to get the death penalty?
Oh, but for a media that is so precise about the language they always want to hear from everyone who works here, boy, do they just toss words into the salad bowl and mix as they want to come out with a toxic stew. It really makes no sense to me, Janine, that they are hunched over in anger at all times. They are, I think, physiologically incapable of finishing a sentence or addressing any issue without mentioning Donald Trump's name 5 or 10 times. He and I were looking at the Washington Post the other day, and he pointed out that there were 6 of the 7 articles on the front page were about him, and only because the All-Star game was in town. Or it probably would have been 7 out of 7. And so it tells you something. The obsessive outrage has been mainstreamed and regularized. And I think this is a very serious point, because it's not just that the outrage and the who can out-crazy the next on cable TV has been accepted, it's now expected. You have a lot of print journalists who have contracts with these cable news stations. And so even though it has their print affiliation below their names, they're performing for the cameras and the viewers on those particular networks. I take complete offense with a smile on my face, but on behalf of those who suffered loss, grievous loss on 9/11, over 3,000 Americans gone, Kristallnacht, 2,400 plus Americans killed at Pearl Harbor. My goodness, they're comparing it to this. What do the families feel when they hear that? You know, and so it's completely over the top. And I just want to tell you something else. You and I can complain about it, but I have a slightly different view. I'm not sure it really matters. I'm not sure it matters. The president's approval ratings are far higher than the Democrats in Congress, than the mainstream medias. I don't think it matters, because people curate from each and every event what they think is most important to them. What's most important to them is that this president, in the tradition of the presidents from the last 75 years, beginning with Eisenhower, met with the leader of the Kremlin. He's duty-bound to keep us out of war. And he's trying to forge a conversation on issues that affect both countries and not the rest of the world. North Korea, the Middle East, Israel, Iran, nuclear proliferation, Syria, obviously the Ukraine. So many different issues to discuss with these different heads of countries.
So we've got a president who's doing his duty, which, as you say, is to keep us out of war, and doing what every president has done for the last 75 years, which is meet with the leader of the Kremlin. And they're yelling, you know, the sky is falling. But, you know, when Blumenthal says, and it is a 9/11 moment, just like before 9/11, what could they possibly be talking about? Everyone is like, you know, saying, what is it that these people are talking about?
First of all, it gets somebody like Senator Blumenthal on the next TV to talk more crazy. I have to say, he represents the people of Connecticut. Connecticut suffered losses on 9/11 in the towers, if not on those airplanes. So how could he possibly do that and equate that to the grievous loss of life, the worst terrorist attack on American soil in our nation's history? Let's recap last week, because the media don't want to talk about it. The president started the week out at NATO, where he extracted $44 billion in contributions toward the shared defense from these countries, on the way to securing commitments for hundreds of billions of dollars more into the future. Secretary Stoltenberg of NATO thanked President Trump. On Twitter and in person, you know, publicly, saying thank you for doing this. It's because of his leadership and his stewardship that this is happening, that other countries are keeping their commitments the way that our country has. Then he went over to the UK to reaffirm our great and historic relationship by meeting with the Queen, who I think renewed the guards for the first time, we're told, in about 70 years, also with Theresa May. And then over to his meeting with Putin, which is not unlike what other presidents have done with the leader of the Kremlin at the time. I want to say one more thing. It is just stark raving mad that when the media think about Russia, all they think about is election meddling. And when they think about the Supreme Court, all they think about is abortion. There are so many different issues to talk about. The president has said, yes, he believes the intelligence, Russia interfered, but Janine, it was unsuccessful interference. There was no collusion. It didn't. And Rod Rosenstein said that last week when he announced the indictments of the 12 Russians. He said there's no evidence that it affected a vote or swung the electoral outcome. Why does the media say that? And why did Obama and Brennan and Clapper, the last two who are cable news pundits now, why did they bury the intelligence that they had? They had it in the fall of 2016. I was the campaign manager at the time. They never came to me me and said, we want you to see this. They buried it because they thought she would win and Trump would lose. And then all of a sudden, it became a big deal in December and January to them.
You know what? They buried it because they were part of, when they talk about meddling in the election, I think the intelligence community and the DOJ and the FBI was meddling in the election. Anyway, Kellyanne Conway, always good to get your take on all of this. Thank you so much. Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity, the Intolerant Left. While the left and the mainstream media are quick to attack President Trump over meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, they fail to see the real story of Trump's tough policies towards Russia. During an interview on CNBC, President Trump issued a stern warning to Putin if the relationship between the U.S. and Russia collapses. Watch this.
Look at the sanctions I've put on. Look at the diplomats I threw out. Look at all of the things that I've done. Nobody else did what I've done. Obama didn't do it. Obama was a patsy for Russia. He was a total patsy. Look at the statement he made where he thought the mics were turned off, okay? The stupid statement he made. Nobody does a big deal about that. Getting along with President Putin, getting along with Russia is a positive, not a negative. Right. Now, with that being said, if that doesn't work out, I'll be the worst enemy he's ever had.
But President Trump has not only issued warnings, he has a long track record of countering the malicious actions of Vladimir Putin. The president armed Ukraine, increased sanctions on Russia, increased funding to NATO, slapped severe financial restrictions on some of Vladimir Putin's closest allies, and authorized a counterattack on Putin-backed soldiers inside of Syria, killing hundreds. Remember, Russia's takeover of Crimea in the Ukraine, Putin's power grab in Syria, and the election meddling all happened on Obama's watch. Joining me now with a reaction from the Fox Business Network, Lou Dobbs. Good evening, Mr. Dobbs, and how are you this evening?
Good to see you, Judge.
All right. Why can't they at least recognize what is fact? If they want to make up stuff and editorialize, that's okay. But they can't recognize the facts.
They don't want to recognize the facts. The reality here is there is nothing accidental about what the left-wing media is doing, or the desperate Dems, the Lilliputian liberals who think they can compete with this president. They have to attack like a huge pack of hyenas to have any chance against getting the attention of this president. And even then, it's not a fair fight. This president is achieving more than any president in modern political history. You mentioned some of the achievements. And Putin learned something very, very important for world peace. He learned that there is not even an ounce of backup in President Trump. He thought he was dealing there for a while with an Obama-like figure. Yeah. And as soon as he did press in Syria, hundreds of his so-called patriotic Russians who were doing his bidding in Syria were dead on the battlefield.
That's right. And you know what I find interesting? There's so much criticism of the president as it relates to his going toe-to-toe with our NATO allies, because they don't want to pay their full fare. But what is amazing is Germany is now buying its energy from Russia, and while they buy it from Russia, they're saying, hey, U.S., NATO, all of you, protect us in case Russia comes after us. First of all, why is Germany buying their energy from Russia and then asking us for our money in case that we need to defend them? What's that about?
Because just as the president has said, there have been in succession 3 American presidents who have been dumb enough to permit this direction on the part of Germany. They are in effect paying blackmail to Russia. Vladimir Putin won't hit them with tactical nuclear weapons or whatever, because he is getting a payment, whether it's for a pipeline, whether it is putting a chair on the board of a German chancellor on the chair of the pipeline. This is ridiculous, and it's preposterous, and not one person in American media has been talking about this but me.
You know what? I actually thought I actually thought that there was a reason that maybe, and I know we're exporting energy now. The United States is starting to be this huge exporter of energy. I said, well, maybe the prices. No, it's blackmail.
It's outright blackmail, and Merkel has paid it. By the way, each German leader has been paying it. All of Europe is dependent upon Russia in one form or another, some small, some large percentages of their energy. And each one of the European nations is dependent on Russia for energy. And that's exactly what Putin wants. It's what's working. And what was it that President Trump, in that summit in Helsinki, attacked and suggested that Merkel do? And that is back the heck out of that pipeline and start buying your energy from your friends.
Okay, so the United States is getting stronger as it relates to the exporting of energy, correct?
Absolutely. We are a net exporter for the first time of petroleum products. This is remarkable, the success of, and to be very clear, it didn't start under Obama. It started under Trump. And the full push for petroleum exports is remarkable. We are right now the largest oil producer in the world.
In the world.
And that may change because the president is also convinced Saudi Arabia to help with lowering prices by raising production so they may be competitive with us once again.
Well, you know what? But the good news is if we at some point can rely on our own energy, that's a good thing.
It's a wonderful thing, and it's a part of the deal. We have North America is replete with petroleum reserves.
Absolutely.
This is the richest area in the world when it comes to natural resources.
And we don't have to rely on the other guys anymore.
We really do not.
Lou Dobbs, always good to have you on Hannity. And earlier today, joining me now is Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi and Fox News contributor Tammy Bruce. All right, good evening to both of you.
Hi there.
You know, Pam, I have to tell you, when I hear about people burning the American flag and chanting F America and all of the other stuff that we can't possibly say, it's stunning to me, but the First Amendment protects all this.
That's right. It does protect that, and, you know, we fought for this country to have the First Amendment right to do that. But let me say, shame on Maxine Waters. These were her supporters, and she's out there representing, allegedly, the United States of America. She should have come out and condemned them burning our flag right away. Her supporters said they weren't there to incite hate or violence, yet they have pipes and bats. Really? I mean, she should be ashamed of herself because she has not come out and condemned this. And Janine, you and I have been saying this for a long time. She can stop this, but she won't. She keeps doubling down and making it worse.
Okay, and so, Tammy, I mean, what Pam says is true. She could have said something about it. Sure. But this is the very same person who's saying, when you see these people in public, push back, get a crowd. What's going to happen when, you know, something crazy happens? I understand that people were there with bats and pipes.
We want this to stop before someone's killed or seriously injured. We've seen where there's protests where someone ends up getting killed. We've all rejected that. The problem is indeed that this has been the permission slip that Maxine Waters gave the people who are on the edge. The good news is it's not everyone, right? These events make the news. It is a select, smaller group of people. We should not presume that this is, all of America. I'm begun to question whether or not we're as divided even as we're told we are. So in the midst of something like this, things can be done. Yes, Maxine Waters should have said, oh my gosh, I was wrong. Clearly this is now ballooning into something else.
She was forced to say that.
But you know who else has not said anything after something like this? Is Paul Ryan, is Mitch McConnell, other Republican leadership that could say, clearly Representative Waters is not saying anything, but they've got the power to take action against her internally in Congress, but also...
What kind of power would they take?
Well, I think that you can limit someone's position on committees. You can limit the engagement that they can have in Congress. You can embarrass them with a rebuke and a censure. None of those things have occurred, and they can.
I gotta tell you, Pam, it seems like in Congress, what Tammy is saying is a great idea, but one hand washes the other. Like, all of a sudden we find out that there's a slush fund for sexual harassment. They all knew about it, and they're like, shocked. There's gambling in Casablanca. I mean, it is the the left and the right, one hand washing the other. What can we do about this?
Well, this isn't the America that we grew up in, is it? Nor is it the America we want to live in. And she needs to, on her own, condemn this. She needs to stop what she's been saying. I know Tammy's right. You and I have been saying this, Janine. Someone is going to get hurt. And really, I'm so glad the other side of protesters didn't show up that day. Yep. Yet her supporters still did, armed with pipes and bats, yet they weren't there for fear or hate. Really?
You know, one of the things, Tammy, that concerns me is that when we have issues like we had in, let's say, with Antifa, when they jump into their ninja outfits, and then there's a stand down by police, as we saw in Berkeley with the arson and the fires and the damaging property. The stand down by police, what can we do about that?
Well, I think the public conversation is important. We've got to shame that kind of behavior. We've got to point it out. We've got to make sure people know what cities are doing what, and there needs to be a public shaming. But also, may I suggest, and I'm not a big fan of hate crimes. You know, a crime is a crime, but you've got action here where yes, you've got the First Amendment when it comes to expressing your opinion. That does not include protection for violence or vandalism or terroristic threats or anything like that. What if, in fact, there were serious repercussions to that kind of action? We know that the charges were dropped on all of the rioters at the Trump inauguration, the Antifa and others. Perhaps it's about adding that kind of action as an additional hate crime. If you attack people because of their political beliefs, yell and speak all you want. Physical violence and terrorism, that kind of dynamic, we've got to address.
Pam, you're the Attorney General. Now, when the police stand down, what power do we have, and we have 30 seconds, what power do we have to force them to act?
Well, it's very difficult because, again, it's free speech, and that's what these people want. They want the police to attack them. They want to be arrested. That's what they want. They want to be dragged out in handcuffs. The only crime that I saw based on in front of Maxine Waters' office was the theft of that flag. And that's a petty theft, Tammy, but it is a crime, and it is showing that people will be held accountable. But it's a bigger picture than this. You know, these people have just got to stop it.
We have to deal with violence. Coming up, more of...
So what are the Democrats really after when it comes to their Russian obsession? Rush Limbaugh put out an interesting theory yesterday.
When they lose, it can't be because they have been rejected by voters. No, there has to be some nefarious reason. There has to be tampering. There has to be meddling. There has to be collusion. And in the process, they have done a great job of making so many millions of Americans question the integrity of elections now. I believe this all has a very long-term purpose, and that is to eventually get rid of elections. Don't laugh and be very careful in criticizing me, because I'm here to tell you that if they could, they would.
That might sound a little out there unless you tuned in to Morning Joe this week.
Can we rewrite the Constitution and have another president take over right now?
I mean, seriously, get rid of the Constitution and put in a new president. That's the attitude that the left's taken on Morning Joe. Joining me now to debate what's really going on here is Leo Terrell, a civil rights attorney, and Horace Cooper, a senior fellow at the National Center for Public Policy Research. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us here. I really do appreciate it. Leo, what's the end game? What's the obsession with Russia? Why is it, and what's the end game? What are you playing for?
Well, first of all, can I just make a comment about Russia? Russia is way out there. Al Gore, with grace and dignity, accepted the 2000 election. Regarding Russia, Donald Trump he should start inviting Dan Coates to the White House for more dinner, because he's going to throw him under the bus. And your friend Matt, who earlier this week talked about how President Trump threw the intelligence under the bus, Matt got the memo and realized his wife works at the White House. My point is very simple. The Russian meddling is real. Both the Democrats and the Republicans realize that. And finally, your colleague, Trey Gowdy, you know him, Jason, he said the Mueller probe is necessary.
Now, Leo, let's just make sure we get our facts straight, because it was Barack Obama weeks before the election said that nobody was doing it, and even if they tried, they couldn't do it. Was that true or not true?
Well, see, that's a good move, Jason. I said I mentioned your colleague Trey Gowdy. You go to the Obama card. Trey Gowdy currently keeps saying that the Mueller probe is legit. You want to talk about Obama?
We're not arguing.
I want to talk about Trey Gowdy.
About that. We're not arguing about that. I'm asking you, was Barack Obama accurate or inaccurate? Would he lie or was he telling the truth?
I can't get into the headset of Barack Obama as far as his motivation.
All right, you did answer it.
But I can tell you what's going on right now.
On that one. I understand that. Let's go to Horace.
Okay, great.
Here. How do you read this?
Look, the left hasn't accepted these elections. They're like, and pardon the expression here, but this is like Jason the 15th, the horror movie, in terms of Hillary Clinton coming up with an excuse after excuse after excuse for why they didn't win, and they haven't accepted this outcome yet. And that is their real problem. They're not concerned about America's national security the way they'd have you believe it.
Now, they suddenly have become hawks, though. When I look at the Democrats...
These are chicken hawks. These are chicken hawks. Look at what they did over my lifetime. I started working in Washington, D.C., and I watched an organization called the American Security Council. They used to rate the Democrats like Nancy Pelosi, like Dick Durbin, like Chuck Schumer, all the way to the present. What we saw was every chance it came to protect America from Moscow, they were on the other side. They were cutting side deals. Kennedy talking over with the Russian government and their leaders, all the way to the present after George W. Bush reaches an agreement with Eastern European countries about an anti-ballistic missile program. So, what do? They
Jason, Horace is just, those are talking points. We're talking about you cannot
it's reality.
Trust
history, I think,
Putin.
but yeah.
You cannot trust Putin. I mean, Jason, you know this. Even your own Republican
Unless
colleagues
you're waiting for an election,
that the Russian meddling is real. And more importantly, and let's be honest, Horace, look at the Al Gore footage. He accepted with dignity and class the 2000 election.
You got to go back to 2000.
Way off.
Wait a second.
Still hasn't.
Throwing away elections. Come on.
You make a big point about Al Gore accepting the outcome of the election. I haven't seen any of that from Hillary Clinton. I saw it with grace and dignity from Mitt Romney. I saw it from Al Gore. But what about Hillary Clinton? And why can't the Democrats accept that Donald Trump is the president?
The Democrats can accept Donald Trump as the president. He won the Electoral College. Let me say that right now. But, Jason, again, we have a problem. We have Russian meddling in our fundamental process. Elections, voting, and your Republican colleagues say the same things. And again, let's say this. Please, President Trump, may I make one plea? Please, President Trump, don't fire Dan Coates for being honest. Please, he's a good director of national intelligence. He's going to get rid. Please don't do that.
Of you. Horace, I want to ask you. Rush Limbaugh made a pretty strong allegation that the end game here is actually that the Democrats want to get rid of elections. You had Mike Barnicle, who's a pretty, respected person, at least he was before last week, who's out there saying, let's get rid of the Constitution or amend the Constitution so that we can instill a new president.
When Moscow created out of whole cloth the international peace movement that took over Europe with their funding, where was the left? When Moscow said that it was a farce that the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, would put up a strategic defense initiative, where were the progressives? They were with Moscow. You come all the way to today, 2017, when we had the President's budget on defense. Where were the progressives? They did not support it.
Does he really believe this? Does he believe what he's actually saying?
He does.
Theodore Roosevelt said, talk softly and carry a big stick.
Okay. Because I could have sworn that it was President Kennedy. Hey, Horace, how about missiles of October? 13 days in October. I suggest you read it and review it. Because the guy in the White House was a guy named JFK. He was a Democrat. But you may not want to know that.
And that's the last time.
And he was probably the last hawk you guys have ever had.
Hey, go to one more recently when the Russians, brushed in and took over Crimea. I didn't hear the Democrats criticizing Barack Obama. I didn't hear them raising this. And the president misspoke at a press conference, something he recanted and clarified, and y'all are going nuts. That's what she's saying.
No, I'm 60 years. 60 years, the left has been on the wrong side, siding with Moscow against the interests of America.
Let Leo have the last word. We got just 10 seconds.
Horace and Jason, Talk is cheap. Let's see some results. If President Trump is going to have Putin come to the White House, let's see some results in all these so-called disasters created by Obama. Let's see some disaster, because talk is real cheap right now.
Well, there has been action, and you know what? One of the things that Vladimir Putin is looking down the pipe at is the fact that there are tens of billions of more dollars going into the defense of our NATO allies, and that didn't happen under any other president than President Trump. Gentlemen, I thank you for joining us on this beautiful Friday night. Thanks for coming in. Wow. Joining me now for a reaction is Victor Davis Hanson, one of the world's leading historians and senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. I believe you're in Hawaii, so aloha, and thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
No, I do appreciate it. Look, you have Democrats on that clip trying to compare something that he said he misspoke about and comparing that to Pearl Harbor, which you're just a few miles from. I mean, how over the top? What's your reaction when you hear that?
I'm a little worried because Donald Trump has expelled Russians from the United States. He's beefed up the sanctions. He's armed the Ukrainians. He's warned Putin in very blunt terms about his behavior in Syria. We've killed Russian mercenaries that attacked a U.S. base. He's upped U.S. oil production that Putin didn't like. He's really jawboning NATO to get tough. He's criticized German dependence, increasing dependence on Russian oil, and yet this is a man that has 7,000 nukes. So when he goes out in a press conference and he knows the questions are going to be how willing are you to insult the man next to you that has 7,000 nukes? It's a lose-lose situation, because if he doesn't insult them, then he's colluding, and if he does insult them, he's blown up the summit. So I don't think we want to get into the spiral escalatory situation where we keep trying to push Putin in a corner, especially after we've seen 8 years of the reset process where we didn't do much about Ukraine or Crimea. We dismantled missile defense in Eastern Europe. We had this sort of tell Vladimir to behave and then I'll get reelected and I'll be flexible. We made fun of Mitt Romney. We cut down oil production. We didn't do much about defense. And so it's surreal that it's almost as either we have to overreact because we didn't do much about Putin, and now we have to push Trump into a corner where we're almost at war with a power that, in terms of economic size, is not comparable to China. China's espionage apparatus makes Putin's look pathetic. So it's getting very dangerous. All this is getting dangerous, Jason, because, I mean, rhetorically, we've exhausted the vocabulary of killing Trump. I mean, we decapitate him, we stab him, we ritually shoot him, we burn him up, we blow him up. We've exhausted suing under the Electoral College. We want to abandon it. We've looked at the emoluments clause. We looked at the 25th Amendment. We boycotted the inauguration. We've introduced articles of impeachment. And now we're in this rhetorical that he's Stalin, that he's Hitler, that he's a traitor. What's the next level? Where does this lead? I mean, there's 330 million people out there, and if some people think, well, he's Hitler, I've been told that, then what are you going to do about it? And the next level.
Well, he also, I mean, the Democrats also sound, I mean, first of all, they sound very unhinged, but they also sound like they're being hypocritical. President Trump tweeted out a clip of what Hillary Clinton said about Russia when she was Secretary of State back in 2010.
Yes.
And she told a Russian TV network, let me read this for you. We want very much to have a strong Russia. Okay. We want to have a strong Russia because a strong, competent, prosperous, stable Russia is, we think, in the interests of the world. Now, I didn't hear a single one of those Democrats who are yelling and screaming from a misstatement by the president at a press conference have the same sort of reaction to what Hillary Clinton said, in that she wanted a strong Russia. How did that strike?
Yes. And beyond that, Barack Obama says you've played has already assured the United States that they're incapable of affecting an election. This is the President of the United States. So what's the font of all this? And the font of it is unhappiness over an unexpected loss, perhaps regret that they weren't tougher on Russia on the other side, the other 8 years, but more importantly, to delegitimize president in lieu of an agenda that might win 51% of the support.
But have you ever seen the Democrats? So, I mean, Democrats have always tried to advocate for let's have a dialogue. And then when the person in the White House, Donald Trump, is actually negotiating and actually having a dialogue and being a diplomat, they go unhinged. Have you ever seen that?
I don't think it has anything to do with Russia. I think it has everything to do with the election. If it wasn't Russia, it would be another melodrama. Remember that Reset was formed and birthed in reaction that George W. Bush was too harsh, Obama and Hillary Clinton said, in his reactions to the invasion of Alsatia. So they were going to be magnanimous, and that was going to make Russia like us. Instead, they viewed that outreach as weakness to be exploited.
Well, Professor, I could listen to you all day. You've got a great perspective, and we thank you so much for joining us, particularly on this Friday night.
Juan Williams, co-host of The Five, and Republican Jason Chaffetz was chairman of the House Oversight Committee until he became a Fox News contributor, and we're glad that he's here. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Happy birthday.
Yeah, thanks. I want to know how Shannon Bream was tweeting photos today from an undisclosed beach somewhere with an adult beverage, and I'm here. I want Robert Mueller to investigate that.
It's 11. You took the midnight shift on your birthday?
Yeah.
Can't you pull out that birthday card and say, hey?
No, I've got zero clout. So let's get to the news. Jason Chaffetz, when this started, it broke today in the New York Times, I think early today, there is a recording. We'd heard that there might be recordings that were seized by the FBI, and Michael Cohen did secretly tape at least one conversation, it could be more, that involved Karen McDougal and whether or not there should be a payoff. Rudy Giuliani quickly confirms it and says it's going to be exculpatory, it's going to help the president because he says, I don't want to pay her, nothing happened here. And everyone thought this was leaked maybe by the Cohen camp, and then we find out tonight, wait a second, actually Donald Trump and his camp had to waive attorney-client privilege. So did they want this story out there because it's changing the subject?
I always suspicious when stories come out on a Friday, but it does beg the question, why do you can keep this tape under wraps, but I think that Giuliani probably has a point here to say, this is going to show that Donald Trump actually wanted documented. I mean, what we hear and what we read is that he wanted to make sure that if there was some sort of payment, that there was a check so that there would be a paper trail.
And not cash.
Yeah, there would be a paper trail. That's very different than the way you hear Democrats.
And to be clear, the president denies there was an affair with her.
And there was no payment.
And in the end, he did not pay her, at least as far as we know. There's no record that he paid her.
Yes.
Juan, what do you make of this story?
Wait a second, gentlemen. It was that the National Enquirer paid her. Mm-hmm. And we know the relationship.
Which we knew for months.
Right, and we know the relationship between Donald Trump, Michael Cohen, and the publisher of the National Enquirer. The question would be whether or not this was done on behalf of the president. And the president previously had said he had no knowledge of this entire relationship. So Rudy Giuliani says this is somehow exculpatory. To the contrary, it seems to me that this is saying the president was misleading the American people back during those final days of the campaign.
But in this case, this is the Southern District of New York, not Robert Mueller's special counsel probe.
Right.
That's looking at Michael Cohen, maybe looking at the president. But then, as you heard in Jonathan Hunt's report, now Robert Mueller's team wants to talk to a former Manhattan madam who knows Roger Stone. Isn't that going to feed this notion that this investigation is sort of out of control?
Why would that be?
Why does he want to talk to a Manhattan madam?
Well, the question is whether or not there's a pattern here, a pattern in which, as we might learn from the tape of the Michael Cohen-Donald Trump conversation, Cohen is representing Trump in such a way as to pay off, silence women, and in fact, whether or not there are additional conversations, and potentially, is it the case that this madam, who Roger Stone just said is one of his associates, and Roger Stone has been close to the president for many years, whether or not there was some relationship there in which money was changing hands.
But I mean, Roger Stone, what in the world does he have to do this? We're so far off the rails. The allegation was the fact that there was going to be some sort of collusion. Democrats have put up no evidence of that. And I think one of the reasons that Mueller dished this off to the Southern District of New York is because
the Cohen part.
The Cohen part, because it had nothing to do. They didn't see, after all those months and months and months of investigation, they didn't see anything. If there was something that was collusion, that was the original impetus to start this
Russian
witch hunt.
Collusion,
Yes,
not a Russian collusion.
Yeah, I mean, This is all well before he's even a candidate to become the president of the United States. And I think the Democrats will rue the day when they go and they just say that this is fair game to go look through somebody's life like that. That is absolutely off the rails.
I heard Alan Dershowitz, who's been somewhat supportive of the president's rights, at least, not defending his agenda or anything, and he's taking grief for it, saying earlier today that he thinks this could be problematic for the president because, look, it doesn't look good. There's all these talks, there's payoffs, there's this. But where's the crime?
Well, at the moment, it's a matter of political deception, and I think it's, further damaging to the president's credibility. And for people who are true believers.
Donald Trump never tried to pretend that he was some holier than everybody else. I think everybody kind of understood going into the election that Donald Trump maybe didn't live the life of, a Mormon kid from Provo.
Just as an example.
Just as an example. I'm just saying.
But there's a bigger point, Jason, which is that if you say something to the American people and say, you know what, that's in the past. That did happen or didn't happen, but it's in the past. People have a different reaction. As we know with the Stormy Daniels case.
But as we understand now, there was no payment.
No, hang on.
And the president is asking for documentation.
But in the Stormy Daniels case, again, he said, oh, no, I don't know anything about it. And now we learn, oh, yeah, he did have to know something about it. And remember, Stormy Daniels' attorney, Michael Aventi, has said he believed there were tapes. Nobody believed there were tapes. Now we know there are
Juan,
tapes.
let's concede your point that this is not what a president wants to be talking about in general. But at the end of the day, how did Robert Mueller start with, to Jason's point, was there Russian collusion in the election? An important question to answer. And now we're talking to Madams, we're talking to the National Enquirer.
But this is Roger. Remember, as you said, Ed, this has gone to the Southern District of New York. This is not Mueller's
But the Madam,
this came up, and Mueller may in fact benefit if in fact Cohen decides he's going to cooperate.
So that's what it's here, Jason. It's to squeeze Michael Cohen, ultimately hoping he's got some other goods on collusion or something. They're hoping, they're praying.
And I still don't understand why the attorney-client privilege doesn't prevail over everything. I think everybody has the right to talk to
Trump gave up the attorney-client privilege.
But I'm just saying it's a seminal question, and it doesn't mean he gave up every other piece of documentation.
No, I agree, but he did on this case.
Authorities go in and raid your attorney's office. I think that is a concern that everybody should take into account.
Oh, I agree, but I must say it's perplexing to me that the president and his team want this out there and then pretend like, oh, no, we didn't know it was coming.
Yeah. Gentlemen, I suspect there'll be a lot more coming. Juan, Jason, appreciate it.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. And breaking tonight, big news from the NFL. President Trump weighing in on all of it again. The new Anthem rule already unraveling. A leaked document from the Miami Dolphins lays out discipline and fines for players. They are in response to new rules calling for players to stand for the anthem or simply stay in the locker room pregame. But the Players Association is balking at all of this. Now, as I noted, the president getting involved again late tonight, tweeting the NFL national anthem debate is alive and well again. Can't believe it. Isn't it in contract that players must stand at attention, hand on heart? The $40 million commissioner must now make a stand. First time kneeling, out for game. Second time kneeling, out for season, no pay. Well, let's bring in legendary sportscaster, Fox News contributor Jim Gray, who, by the way, is a recent inductee of the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Congrats, Jim. And tonight we're talking football, another sport you cover closely.
Thanks,
why can't they all just get along?
Well, I know this really has been going on for far too long, and the NFL had no policy, and that's what led to this. It was unlike the NBA, where the policy, in quotes, was such that we request, but do not require that you stand for the national anthem. Well, that's not a policy. That just led to the chaos that we now have. It had basically gone away after Colin Kaepernick was no longer on a team. There were a few players doing it, and the president made that speech to his supporters, and the issue all got stirred up, and now here we are. The NFL owners tried to clear this up at their owners' meeting. They issued now this policy where it's conduct detrimental to the game. Mm-hmm. Stay in the locker room. If you stay in the locker room, we can find you, perhaps take even further action. The Dolphins were responding to the league mandate to put that into the code. This got leaked, and so now here we are. And so now the NFLPA, which feels that this is a grievance situation because it wasn't collectively bargained with their players, Just because you're kneeling that you do not respect the military, and that's the point that the NFL Players Association has been making. They've made this very anti-military, those who are against those who are kneeling. But those who are kneeling say there is social injustice and they want it corrected. You can't have this going on. The NFL needs to have a policy, stand firm with the policy, and then just decide what it is that they're going to do. Now, there is no right to play in the National Football League. So the owners of the National Football League can make what they want to be their policy on their employees. That doesn't necessarily mean that the owners, if they decide that they don't want to have this going on during the national anthem, are against social injustice. They want social justice, but perhaps it's not before the start of a football game.
Right.
And so, you know, this issue is keeps bubbling to the forefront because President Trump has whoever he believes feel strongly about this in his base, and he's going to keep ginning it until he gets it to the point where he wants it.
Sure.
And until that time, it's not going to go away. But you have Chris Johnson, the owner of the Jets, whose brother Woody Johnson works in the Trump administration as the ambassador to England. He said that he'll pay all of the fines for the players. You had Steve Tisch come out today and say you would hope that the president would have better things to do than worry about this, North Korea, Russia, so on and so forth. And so I'm just not certain. I've been in this game for 40 years. I have not had one fan come up to me and tell me that they go to a football game because they want to hear the national anthem. Does that mean it's not beautiful? I love the national anthem. I stand with respect. I don't like what's going on. But I have not heard one fan say that they come to a football game or watch a football game because of the national anthem.
We've got less than 30 seconds. I hear you. You know, people should be able to stand for social justice and make their points. But there are a lot of fans out there who want to see respect for the flag, and there have been suggestions that TV ratings have been down, that attendance was down. You say the president obviously has been inflaming this, but bottom line, aren't there some fans out there who just want them to stand for the anthem and move on and play the game?
Of course, a lot of fans want that. And by the way, if it's one fan, 5%, 10%, or 50%, and there is over 53% of the fans, the last survey taken, that do not like this. If you antagonize one fan and you're the National Football League, you can't have this going on, particularly when it's in large numbers, and a large segment of the population hates this. They can't stand it, and they want it to stop, and the NFL owners and the commissioner have to come up with a policy, and guess what? The players need to come together, and they need to figure this out, because this is really not what football is all about.
Jim Gray, well said. We appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Ed. Happy birthday. Many more.
You. I appreciate it.
Join me right now to talk about the fallout. Former senior advisor to Ronald Reagan, Mr. Ed Rollins.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. I haven't seen you since all this unfolded, and my goodness.
I watched you. You inspired me on Monday when you gave proper comments on what had happened, and it worked out the way I thought you hoped it would.
Well, thanks, Ed. I think that, you know, you got to be fair and you got to be honest, and when it's great, and when it's not great,
you know, the reality is, as you reflect back on a very chaotic week, there was a lot packed into the pre-period. You had a NATO conference that no one's even paying attention to. You had a visit with the Prime Minister of England, which was important.
The Queen.
The Queen. Probably to his highlight reel was going to his golf course in Scotland. And then you sit down with a very important meeting with Putin. This next one will be Putin one-on-one. It'll be focused, and I think to a certain extent, if the president hadn't had the press conference, if he just came out and they read their statements, the statements are perfect statements, and I think they probably had a very positive, but attempting to answer the press, which is obviously all a part of this, I don't think he was quite ready for the way it normally would be. And certainly Putin knew exactly what he was doing. He's been on the world stage for 20 years. So that's all. At the end of the day...
so little damage done, but you think he can turn the corner?
Well, I think he's returned it. And the point that I would make is there was no... You know, I worked for President Reagan, and Reagan, the first 4 years, couldn't meet with any Soviets because they're all dying. 3 of them died in office while he was there, so he could never have a meeting till the second term. And then when he started meeting with Gorbachev, he had a meeting every year, and every single one became more positive. And he was the strongest modern president against the Soviets. And at the end of the day, he got widely criticized after Reykjavik, But now most people say that was the key thing. He said no to a very positive deal and ended up getting a very positive deal at the end of the term.
So in other words, you need to have some kind of relationship. You need to be on friendly enough terms that you can work towards some kind of goal.
Absolutely. And I think to a certain extent that's what the president was attempting to do. And he's very good in these one-on-one with world leaders. He's a little tough sometimes with his Twitter gun. But when he sits down face-to-face with world leaders, he's very, very positive. And I think the more of those he can do, the better he'll be.
He's taken so much criticism because people say, hey, look, you treat our allies pretty badly. Although the silver lining on that one may be that we actually start seeing NATO members contribute their fair share. That said, he's tough on them, and yet it treats Putin with kid gloves. Walk me through that. Is he just trying to do something different?
I think he's trying to do something different. Putin is one of the 3 or 4 tough leaders on the world stage, and he's been there for a period of time, and he'll be there for another 20 years. He is, as the president pointed out, he has the second largest nuclear weapons in the world. I mean, pretty much tied with us. You want to make sure they're always in check. Equally as important, he's been someone who's engaged in a lot of things that are unsavory. And I think to a certain extent, you need to have that relationship to be tough with him and to say we don't do this anymore. Equally as important. He now basically is convinced, and it had nothing to do with his election, but he's convinced that during the election period, the Russians were in here full bore, as they probably have been for many elections. Mm-hmm. And he's warned them that if they step across the line again, they'll pay a price. And I think that's very, very important.
So what do you say to those, they've got something on the president, he's acting like they've got something on him. Do you think that's a bunch of
They had something on the president, been on a long time ago, and who cares?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, being perfectly honest, we've gone through this. People, what could they have on the president? At this point in time, there's all kinds of accusations that are out there and everything else. People made a choice.
I think people would actually, yes. I mean, we've heard the details of the dossier, right, and I think Americans could take that.
So from my perspective, this is a strong country, and we need a strong leader, and he is becoming a very, very strong leader.
All right. Ed, it's good to talk to you.
Thank you.
All right. Turns out it's not just Republican lawmakers who are being attacked for supporting President Trump. Our own Judge Jeanine was invited as a guest on a show called The View yesterday. Guess what happened to her? She got shouted down, completely, utterly disrespected. She was a class act through all of it. But they actually kicked her off the show, all because she defended our president's policies. We've got the shocking video. I need to show you this next. Liberal intolerance on full display on daytime TV yesterday over on ABC when our own Judge Jeanine Pirro appeared as a guest on that little show called The View to promote her new book. Things, they seemed kind of civilized until the topic of President Trump's immigration policies came up. And then this happened.
I want to answer your question because you had your opening statement, which was how horrible it is that Donald Trump is talking about all of these people.
Sorry, that's what you said. You said that
people shouldn't be here end up murdering the children of American citizens.
You know what's horrible? When the president of the United States whips up people to beat the hell out of people. Say goodbye.
So last night on Hannity, Judge Jeanine explained that things got even worse when she tried to clear things up with Whoopi Goldberg backstage after the segment. Watch this.
She said,
blank you.
F you. F you. And I said, Whoopi, did you just say F you? I mean, she was right here. And then she said, get the F out of this building. And she yelled at me again, get the F out of this building.
You know, there's no reason to ever treat anyone like that, period. No reason. But what really bothers me about something like this is that show invited Jeanine Pirro on. She should be able to have a free exchange of ideas. They don't have to agree with her. But you should be willing to listen and show someone a little bit of respect. Because to me, being able to exchange ideas, that's who we are, and that's who we want to be. Joining me right now, the host of Media Buzz on the Fox News Channel, Howie Kurtz. Howie, look, you have people on all the time. I have people on all the time. We don't always agree with everyone, but we keep it civil. And I'll tell you, when someone leaves, we could have a big, nasty fight. But I promise you, when they walk out of this studio, I want them to know it's okay. I mean, to treat her as poorly as Whoopi did, and then to double down after with all those obscenities, it tells me, I want to know what it tells you, but it tells me just how rigid some people on the left are. Your thoughts?
Whoopi Goldberg was out of control, clearly. You could have played more of the clip showing her screaming at her on the air.
Yep.
What did The View think was going to happen? You invite Judge Jeanine. She is a fiery supporter of President Trump. You want some fireworks. That's what, probably why they invited her, to get some ratings. But then to berate her that way, announce that you're kicking her off, and then yell at her off stage, it just shows a lack of class. I can't think of a better phrase. Lack of class. She was in their living room. She was in their living room at their invitation.
It also strikes me that Whoopi may feel intellectually fragile, because you should be able to hear different viewpoints and to debate them and to argue them without having it turn into total hysteria, Howie.
And that's what it was. I mean, it made my head hurt just to watch that clip again. And, Whoopi Goldberg did apologize to viewers afterwards for losing it. But, it was also utterly predictable. Now, part of me says, well, maybe that's what they wanted. Create a viral moment. They scream at each other and she tells her F you and everybody's talking about it. But I think it was more fundamental than that. I think that Whoopi Goldberg can't stand the idea of somebody coming on defending the president, particularly on an issue like immigration. Mm-hmm. But, again, not exactly a shock that Judge Jeanine would make a forceful presentation. Now, maybe she's happy because she gets to sell books, but it was really, it made everybody
she was uncomfortable. I mean, she made that clear that she felt very uncomfortable, and I get it. I understand. It's one thing to have a fight on national television, but for the host to then double down and go after you and swear at you and demand you leave the building, I mean, that's also taking it, Howie, to a whole other level.
Yeah, and look, Judge Jeanine is tough, former prosecutor, so she's not like she is some shrinking violet, but she said she was made to feel like dirt. And no guest should ever feel that way. And it was, just like a scene in a barroom brawl where somebody's had too many drinks. And it really, somebody who admired The View over the years when Barbara Walters was there, it has become this sort of liberal, crusading, sometimes hate fest. Meghan McCain does a good job on that show, but it's always 4-1, 5-1.
Meghan does a great job.
Yeah,
she really does, and she's trying to hold up her own there, but it can't be easy. I get back to one of the things that frustrates me terribly about the left, and I don't categorize myself, frankly, as left or right. I'm an independent, and I see each issue individually. But what I get very disturbed by is this lack of tolerance, and somehow it's my way or the highway. And to me, a true intellect is someone who wants to learn and wants to hear about different points of view. And you gotta be willing to be tolerant of those different points of view, Howie.
Well, maybe that's why Judge Jeanine said Trump derangement syndrome, which made Whoopi even more deranged. But you're right. We can have passionate debates, but that was just ugly.
Ugly. Hey, Howie, thank you. And Howie, I'm going to see you on Sunday, right? I'm going to see you. I'm joining your show. I'm so thrilled, so excited. Thank you, Howie, for the invite. Make sure everyone tune in to Media Buzz this Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern on the Fox News Channel. I'm going to be there with Howie. We got lots of stuff to discuss.